The first lie was small. That's how these things always begin. I was standing in my own kitchen holding a mug I'd owned for years when my husband asked me very gently, "Do you remember what day it is, honey?" I did. It was Tuesday, late morning, sunlight coming in from the left window, the one that always caught dust in the air like glitter. I could hear the neighbor's sprinkler clicking in its uneven rhythm. I knew all of that. But something in his tone told me the truth didn't matter. So I hesitated. Just a second too long, and his face changed. Not dramatically, not in a way anyone else would notice, but I'd been married to that man for 41 years. I knew every crease of his expressions. That pause was satisfaction. "It's okay," he said quickly. "You don't have to push yourself." Push myself, like remembering the day was lifting a truck off my chest. I smiled the way sick women are expected to smile, apologetic, soft, ashamed. "I'm sorry," I whispered, and just like that, the story rewrote itself. Everyone in town adored my husband. They said he was patient, devoted, a hero. "He takes such good care of her," the women at church whispered, asking for nothing in return. They never asked me. Not really. By the time people start talking about you instead of to you, the verdict is already in. I used to be sharp. I mean that literally. I taught literature. I lived in language. I noticed patterns, pauses, lies hidden in polite sentences. But none of that mattered once the word decline entered the conversation. Decline gives people permission. That night, he handed me a pill. Blue, oval, no label. "This will help you sleep," he said. "Doctor's orders." I looked at it longer than I should have. "What's it called again?" I asked. He smiled. Too fast. "You've already asked me that." I hadn't. But I nodded anyway. That was the second lie. I learned early on that questioning him didn't bring answers. It brought notes, adjustments, new concerns written in careful handwriting I wasn't allowed to read. So I swallowed, or at least I pretended to. I lay in bed later, listening to his breathing slow beside me, and that's when it happened. The moment. The one people talk about after. I remembered something clearly, not emotionally, logically. I had turned the stove off that morning. I remembered the click, the exact click, which meant something else was wrong, and it wasn't me. I stared into the dark, my heart steady, my mind clear in a way it hadn't been in weeks. If my memory was right, then someone wanted me to believe it wasn't. That's when I understood. I wasn't losing my mind. I was being taught to doubt it, and the lesson had already begun. She arrived on a Wednesday. That detail matters because Wednesdays were always quiet. No church errands, no visitors, just the house settling into its old bones. The doorbell rang once, sharp, confident. My husband answered it before I could even stand up. "She's here," he called out like he was announcing groceries. She stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. Mid-30s, maybe younger if you ignored the hardness around her eyes. Hair pulled back tight, clothes too bright for a caregiving job, sneakers that never touched dirt. "This must be Martha," she said, smiling wide. She didn't wait for me to confirm. "I'm Claire. I'll be helping out from now on." Helping, that word again. My husband hovered behind her, nodding, hands folded like he was relieved to pass me off. "Just a few hours a day," he said, "until things stabilize." Stabilize meant manageable. I noticed immediately what Claire didn't ask. She didn't ask what I liked to eat, didn't ask what I read, didn't ask how I was feeling. She asked where the bathroom was, where the medication was kept, where the locks were. She wrote nothing down. The first thing she did was rearrange my kitchen. "This makes more sense," she said, moving my knives out of reach, "for safety." Safety had become the excuse for everything. I sat at the table and watched her touch my things like they didn't belong to me anymore. At noon, she handed me another pill, green this time. "Doctor adjusted your dose," she said, casually. I looked at my husband. He didn't meet my eyes. That told me everything. By the third day, the house didn't feel like mine. Conversations happened around me, not with me. Plans were made assuming I wouldn't remember them. My purse disappeared, then my keys. "Probably misplaced," Claire said lightly. My husband nodded. I said nothing. I was learning. On Friday afternoon, I heard something I wasn't supposed to. I'd come downstairs quietly, too quietly for someone they believed was unstable. The living room was empty. The kitchen wasn't. They didn't know I was standing there. "She asked about the bank statement again," Claire said, annoyed. "That's not normal, you know." My husband exhaled slowly. "It's just a reflex, old habits." "But she remembered dates," Claire pressed. "That's not severe." Silence. Then his voice, low, careful. "She remembers what I let her remember." My stomach went cold. "You're sure the medication—" "I'm sure," he cut in. "Trust me." Trust me, that was the phrase he used when he was lying. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying his words. She remembers what I let her remember. That wasn't concern. That was control. And suddenly, every forgotten thing made sense. The missing mail, the changed stories, the pills that made my thoughts feel heavy, like walking through water. This wasn't about illness. It was about ownership. The first fall, possibly an accident. The second, an invitation. The next morning, Claire watched me swallow my medication. She waited longer than usual. I forced myself to yawn, to blink slowly, to look dull. Only when she turned away did I spit the pill into my sleeve. My heart was racing, but my hands were steady, because now I knew something important. They didn't see me as a person. They saw me as a problem to be managed, and problems, when they become inconvenient enough, get removed. I looked at my reflection in the hallway mirror. The woman staring at me looked older, but her eyes were awake, very awake. And for the first time since this started, I smiled. Let them think I was slipping. I was finally ready to remember everything. It wasn't money. That came later. The first thing they stole from me was privacy. I realized it on a Sunday morning, the kind that used to mean fresh sheets and quiet coffee. I was standing in the bedroom doorway, watching Claire move through my dresser like she had every right to be there. She didn't jump when she noticed me, didn't apologize. She just smiled. "Looking for clean socks," she said. "You've been misplacing things again." Again. That word was becoming a weapon. I glanced at the open drawer. My letters were disturbed. Old ones, personal ones, the kind you keep because they remind you who you used to be. My hand tightened around the doorframe. "I didn't ask you to do that," I said. She tilted her head, studying me the way people study animals they don't trust. "Your husband did." Of course he did. That afternoon, I tested something. I asked the same question twice. The first time, my husband answered patiently. The second time, barely 20 minutes later, his jaw tightened. "You already asked me that," he said. I hadn't, but now I knew. They were tracking me, not with notes, not with charts, with reactions. Every hesitation, every pause, every repeated word. They were building a case without paperwork. The pills multiplied. Blue at night, green in the morning, white if I looked agitated. Each one dulled something different. The green one made my limbs heavy. The blue one stole my dreams. The white one made me quiet in a way that scared me. But I stopped swallowing them, every single one. I learned how to fake the gulp, how to cough at the right moment, how to let my tongue slacken so it looked like confusion. Acting is easier when the audience already believes the lie. The real theft happened on Thursday. I noticed my checkbook was gone. Not lost, gone. I asked lightly, like it didn't matter. "Oh," my husband said, barely looking up. "I moved it somewhere safe. You were getting stressed." Safe from who? Me? That night I stood in the hallway while they talked in the kitchen. They thought the television masked found. It didn't. "She won't fight it, not like this," Claire said. "She doesn't have the strength, and soon she won't have the clarity." My chest tightened. Soon. "She trusted you," Claire said, almost amused. A pause. Then my husband laughed. That was her mistake. I leaned against the wall to keep from making a sound. That was when anger arrived. Not hot, not explosive, cold, clean, the kind that sharpens instead of burns. I went back to bed and stared at the ceiling, mapping the house in my head, the routines, the blind spots, the moments when they underestimated me most. If they were going to erase me, they were doing it slowly, which meant I still had time, and time, when used properly, can be more dangerous than strength. I whispered my own name into the dark, just to prove I could. And I promised myself something then, something quiet and absolute. They could take my keys, they could take my money, they could take my reputation, but they would not take my ending, not the way they planned. The bottle didn't rattle when I shook it. That was the first thing that bothered me. Pills usually make noise, even the expensive ones, but this bottle stayed quiet in my hand, like it was holding its breath. I was alone in the bathroom, door locked, the fan running. Claire thought I was showering. My husband was downstairs on the phone, performing concern for someone who wasn't me. I turned the bottle over. No pharmacy label, no dosage instructions, just a handwritten sticker with a single word, night. That wasn't medicine. That was a command. I poured one pill into my palm, blue again, smooth, too perfect. I didn't recognize it, and I should have. I'd spent years teaching students how to question what they were given, how to look past authority and ask why. Funny how quickly we forget our own lessons when the threat is quiet and lives in the same house. I slipped the pill into a tissue and hid it in my pocket. That night, I pretended to take it, and for the first time in weeks, I stayed awake. Without the fog, the house sounded different, sharper. I heard footsteps, whispers, drawers opening, the soft click of my husband's office door. At 1:12 a.m., I heard Claire laugh, not a polite laugh, a private one. I counted seconds, then minutes. When my husband returned to bed, he smelled like wine and something sweet that wasn't guilt. He didn't touch me. That told me more than words ever could. The next morning, I felt clear, tired but clear, which made one thing obvious. The medication wasn't treating anything. It was creating it. The confusion, the heaviness, the hesitation everyone pointed at like proof, all manufactured. And suddenly, every accusation felt rehearsed. You're repeating yourself. You forgot again. You're not safe alone. They weren't observations. They were instructions. I tested myself carefully. I read a full article in the newspaper and remembered it. I did mental math, clean, fast. I recalled a poem I hadn't thought about in decades. My mind was intact, which meant what they were doing wasn't care, it was preparation. That afternoon, Claire made a mistake. She spoke too freely. You know, some people don't even realize when it's time to let go. Their families have to make that call. Let go of what? I watched her hands, efficient, detached. I don't have family, I said softly. She smiled without warmth. You have your husband. The way she said it felt final, like a period at the end of a sentence already written. That night, I made a decision. If they were documenting my decline, I'd give them one, but only on the surface. I began to perform. I forgot small things, misnamed objects, paused mid-sentence, but never the same mistake twice, never unpredictably. Confusion, when real, is messy. Mine was neat, controlled, believable. And most importantly, it made them confident. My husband started leaving papers out. Claire stopped watching me as closely. They spoke louder when they thought I was nearby. People get careless when they think they've already won. On Friday evening, I heard the word that confirmed everything: guardianship. My husband said it like it was a gift. Claire responded like it was a relief. And that's when I understood the full shape of the trap. They weren't waiting for me to disappear. They were planning to decide for me. My body, my money, my future, all neatly signed away while I smiled and forgot my own name. I sat alone in the living room afterward, hands folded, face empty. Inside, my thoughts were razor sharp. If they wanted a woman who couldn't speak for herself, I would let them believe they had one, right up until the moment I spoke loud enough for everyone to hear. I wasn't eavesdropping. That's important. I was sitting exactly where they left me, on the living room couch, hands folded in my lap, eyes unfocused on a blank television screen. Claire thought I'd drifted. My husband assumed I'd stopped listening the way people stop listening to background noise. That's the danger of underestimating someone. You forget they're still there. The kitchen was only a few steps away. Old houses carry sound like secrets down hallways. Every word traveled. She's getting worse, Claire said. You can see it now. I held my breath. Good, my husband replied. That makes this easier. Easier? For who? Claire asked. For everyone, he said smoothly. For her most of all. There it was, the lie dressed up as mercy. She signed the medical consent yet? Claire asked. Not yet, but she will. How do you know? He laughed, low, confident. Because she trusts me. My fingers curled into my palm. She won't fight it? Claire pressed. No, she doesn't even know what she's agreeing to anymore. A pause, then something colder. And if she hesitates, we adjust. Adjust. I imagine the pills, the dosages, the quiet compliance. Claire didn't sound entirely comfortable. You're sure that's safe? Claire, he said patiently, like a teacher correcting a slow student, I spent my life around medicine. I know what I'm doing. Silence stretched. Then Claire exhaled. Okay, then after it's done? After guardianship, he said, we move her somewhere quiet, somewhere permanent. My stomach dropped. Not here, she asked. No, he replied. This house is worth too much. The word worth landed hard. I didn't move when they came back into the room. I didn't blink. Claire watched me for a second longer than usual. Hey, she said, you doing okay? I smiled vaguely. I'm tired. She nodded, satisfied. That happens. They had no idea what had just happened because in that moment, the story shifted. It wasn't just about control anymore. It was about removal. That night, I cried silently into my pillow, not from fear, from grief. For the life I'd lived believing love meant safety, for the man I trusted enough to grow old beside. And then I stopped crying, because grief can drown you, or it can harden you. I chose the second. The next morning, I asked a question on purpose. "I used to have a ring," I said lightly. "Did I lose it?" My husband didn't hesitate. "Yes." "Too fast." "Where?" "You took it off. You said it hurt." Another lie. I nodded. "Oh." But now I was counting. Lies had rhythm, tells, patterns, and my husband was getting sloppy. By Sunday, I knew exactly what they planned. A doctor visit, a document, a signature, all done gently, lovingly, with witnesses ready to say I wasn't capable of understanding. I practiced my signature that night in the dark, writing my name in the air with my finger, steady, clear, unmistakably mine. Because here's what they forgot. I didn't need strength. I needed proof. And proof always comes from listening when people think you're powerless. The decision came quietly. No thunder, no dramatic vow in the mirror, just a calm understanding that settled into my bones like winter. If I fought them now, I would lose. They had doctors, paperwork, a story everyone already believed, and I had something far more dangerous: time. The appointment was set for Tuesday. My husband told me twice. Claire reminded me 3 times. They both used the same tone: cheerful, patient, rehearsed. "Just a routine visit," my husband said. "We'll talk about options." Options meant endings. I nodded, smiled, asked what day it was. They exchanged a look. That look said, "She's ready." On Monday night, I packed nothing. No clothes, no keepsakes, no escape plan. That was important. People notice when you prepare to leave. Instead, I prepared to stay. I let myself forget small things. I called the television or radio. I asked where my mother was. I stared too long at door handles like I'd never seen one before. Claire watched closely, then less closely, then not at all. "She's slipping fast," she told my husband. He nodded, satisfied. He kissed my forehead that night like a man saying goodbye to a house he'd already sold. The doctor's office smelled like antiseptic and resignation. I sat in the chair while they spoke around me. "She doesn't fully understand," my husband said gently. I didn't interrupt. The doctor leaned down. "Martha, do you know why you're here today?" I blinked slowly. "Because he loves me?" My husband squeezed my hand. The doctor smiled with pity. That was when I knew I'd chosen correctly. The papers came out: guardianship, medical authority, financial control. My name waited at the bottom like a trap. "Just sign here," my husband whispered. "I'll take care of everything." I picked up the pen. My hand trembled, not from fear, from control. I made the signature sloppy, uneven, convincing. The doctor nodded. Claire exhaled. My husband smiled like a man who'd finally won a long game. That night they celebrated. Wine, laughter, music turned low. They didn't lock my door. Why would they? I was finished. But something changed after that. They stopped hiding. They spoke freely. They argued openly. They planned loudly. Because in their minds, I was already gone. And that's when the truth spills out. Not all at once, but enough. Enough to record, enough to remember, enough to survive. I lay awake that night staring at the ceiling, listening to their voices drift through the vents. And for the first time since this began, I felt calm, because now everything they did next would be evidence, and I was done pretending to not notice. The house changed after the papers were signed. Not physically, emotionally. It relaxed. That's the only word for it. Like a guard who lowers his weapon because he believes the threat is gone. They stopped correcting me, stopped reminding me what day it was, stopped hovering. I was no longer something that required management. I was a formality waiting to be processed. Claire started leaving me alone for longer stretches. She just sleeps, she told my husband, or stares. He didn't question it. People don't question what benefits them. That's when I found the drawer, the one my husband never locked because he never thought I'd look. Inside were folders, clean, organized, labeled in his careful handwriting. Transition, assets, care facilities. Care facilities, plural. I sat on the floor and opened the first folder. Brochures, none of them nearby, none of them kind. Places where windows didn't open, where residents sat in rows, staring at nothing, hands folded like they'd already surrendered. This wasn't care. This was storage. I photographed everything, slowly, carefully. I returned each page exactly where it belonged because missing things raise questions, and questions were dangerous. The second mistake they made was talking about me like I wasn't real. "She won't last long once she's there," Claire said one night, laughing softly. "They never do." "She'll fade," my husband replied, quietly. Fade. Such a gentle word for disappearance. I waited until they drank. They always drank. Wine loosened tongues, confidence, judgment. That night, I slipped the small recorder into the potted plant beside his favorite chair. I'd found it in a box of old electronics in the attic days earlier. He'd forgotten it existed. People forget the tools they no longer need. I didn't sleep. I listened and I learned. About money, about timing, about how long a body can endure when it's chemically softened. They spoke like planners, not caregivers. When I retrieved the recorder the next morning, my hands didn't shake because fear had finally been replaced with certainty. I had their voices, I had their intent, and now all I needed was an audience. They thought I was waiting to be moved, but I was waiting for witnesses. I didn't listen to it right away. That might sound strange, but some truths are heavy. You don't lift them until you're sure your hands are steady. I waited until the house was empty. Claire had stepped out for errands. My husband was at lunch with people who admired him, the kind of people who said things like, "You're a good man," and meant it. I locked my bedroom door, sat on the edge of the bed, and pressed play. At first, there was only background noise, glasses clinking, a chair scraping the floor, low laughter. Then my husband's voice came through the tiny speaker, clearer than I expected. "She's past the point of questioning now," he said. "That's the key." Claire laughed. "You sound proud." "I am," he replied. "Most people don't have the discipline to see something like this through." Something like this. They weren't talking about illness. They were talking about a project. Claire asked about the money, how long before it could be moved, how soon after I was placed things would be finalized. "She won't know," my husband said calmly, "and even if she did, no one would believe her." The words landed like a bruise. They talked about dosages, adjustments, what was safe, what was effective. And then, this part mattered most, they talked about timing. Once she's settled, Claire said, it won't take long. No, my husband agreed. These places, they do the rest for you. The recording ended with laughter, soft, comfortable, certain. I sat there long after the tape stopped. My hands were steady. My heart was not. That afternoon, I did something I hadn't done in months. I called someone. Not a friend, not family, someone who remembered who I was before, a former student, sharp, now successful, someone who once argued with me for an hour over a single line of text because truth mattered to him. I didn't explain everything. I didn't need to. I sent one sentence. I need help, and I need you to believe me. Then I attached the recording. That night, my husband told me we'd be moving soon. Just for a while, he said, to get you the care you deserve. I nodded, smiled, asked him what day it was. He answered without thinking. That's the thing about liars. Once they're comfortable, they stop checking their work. I lay in bed later listening to the house settle. I wasn't scared anymore because now the truth existed outside my body, and once that happens, control starts to slip. Once the truth is spoken out loud, even if only into a machine, it changes shape. It stops living entirely inside you. That's when a plan becomes possible. I didn't rush. Rushing is what desperate people do. I wasn't desperate anymore. I was deliberate. I mapped their habits the way I used to map novels, looking for patterns, beats, blind spots. Claire left every afternoon at exactly 3:30. My husband drank every night after 8. Neither of them checked the landline anymore. They believed the story was finished. That belief made them lazy. The man I'd contacted replied at 2:17 a.m., just 4 words, I believe you. No questions, no doubt. I cried then, not loudly, not long, just enough to release something I'd been holding in my chest for weeks. The next day, I started changing small things. I corrected my husband once, then apologized immediately. I dropped a glass, then laughed like I didn't understand why. I played the role perfectly, because the trick wasn't to appear better, it was to appear worse, just slowly enough that no one panicked. Claire began discussing dates. Early next week, she said casually. That's when transitions usually go smoothest. Transitions, such a harmless word for being disappeared. My husband nodded. I stared at my hands. That night, I hid the recorder somewhere they would never look. Not the bedroom, not the bathroom, the bottom of an old knitting basket in the guest room. People only search places they believe matter. They didn't think I mattered anymore. I rehearsed the final moment over and over in my head. Not confrontation, exposure, because arguments can be dismissed, evidence cannot. 2 days before the move, my husband made his last mistake. He told people. He told neighbors. He told friends. He told the doctor. He painted himself as brave, sacrificial, heartbroken, and in doing so, he gathered exactly what I needed, an audience. The night before everything was supposed to end, I sat alone in the dark. I wasn't afraid. I was ready. Because the thing they never understood was this. I wasn't trying to escape. I was waiting for the moment when the truth would hurt them more than silence ever hurt me. The house filled faster than I expected. People came with smiles and sympathy, carrying baked goods and soft voices, the way they do when they believe they're saying goodbye to someone who won't remember it anyway. My husband stood near the window, receiving their praise like medals. He's been so strong, someone whispered. I don't know how he does it, said another. He nodded, hand over heart. I watched from the staircase. Unsteady, silent, perfect. When he cleared his throat to speak, the room quieted instantly. I just want to thank you all, he began, voice thick with practiced emotion. This isn't easy. Letting go never is. Letting go. I stepped forward. The sound of my shoes on the wood floor cut through his speech like a blade. Heads turned. Confusion rippled. My husband froze. Martha, he said quickly, you should sit down. I didn't. I'd like to say something, I said. My voice didn't shake. That was the first crack. Claire moved toward me. You're tired, she whispered. Let's touch me, I said calmly, and this ends badly for you. She stopped. The silence in the room became heavy, uncomfortable, real. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the recorder. Small, unimpressive, deadly. This, I said, holding it up, is what care sounds like when no one thinks you're listening. My husband laughed once, too loud. This is ridiculous. She's confused. I pressed play. His voice filled the room, clear, cold, certain. She won't know. No one will believe her. These places, they do the rest for you. Someone gasped. Someone else swore. I didn't look at them. I looked at him. Claire backed away. My husband stepped forward, hands raised. You don't understand. Oh, I understand. I've been understanding quietly for weeks. The recording ended. Silence crashed down like a wave. Then chaos. A man near the door left abruptly. Someone whispered police. The doctor looked pale. My husband tried one last time. She manipulated this, he said desperately. She's sick. I smiled. No, I said. I was sick of being erased. The knock came sooner than expected. Firm, certain, not polite. When the door opened, I didn't move. I didn't need to. The truth had already arrived. The officers didn't rush. They never do when they already know enough. They stepped inside calmly, eyes scanning the room, the faces, the broken expressions of people who had just watched a hero fall apart in real time. My husband tried to speak first. Of course he did. He always believed the right words could still save him. This is a misunderstanding, he said, hands trembling now despite his effort to steady them. My wife is ill. She's been paranoid for months. One of the officers looked at me, not with pity, with assessment. Ma'am, he said gently, are you in danger? I met his eyes. Yes, I answered. I have been. That was all it took. Claire tried to leave. She made it 3 steps before another officer stopped her. Where do you think you're going? I was just helping, she stammered. I was doing my job. The officer glanced at the recorder still resting in my palm. We'll sort that out. My husband's voice broke. You can't do this, he whispered, to me now, not them. You don't know what you're destroying. I stepped closer, close enough that only he could hear me. I know exactly what I'm destroying. The lie. His face collapsed. In that moment, the man everyone admired disappeared. What stood there instead was small, afraid, ordinary, and furious. They escorted him first, hands behind his back, head down. People watched from the corners of the room, some crying, some stunned, some angry they'd been fooled. No one looked at me like I was confused anymore. They looked at me like I was awake. Claire followed, crying, promising, blaming. I felt nothing. Some endings don't deserve emotion. When the house finally emptied, the silence felt different, not heavy, clean. An officer stayed behind, asking questions, taking notes. I answered every one, clearly, precisely, the way I always had. Later, when the door closed for the last time, I stood alone in the living room, my living room. The furniture looked the same, but the air didn't. I sank into the chair by the window and let my hands rest in my lap. They were steady. That night, I slept without pills, without fear, without pretending, and when morning came, I remembered everything. Survival is loud while it's happening. Afterward, it's strangely quiet. No pills on the nightstand, no footsteps checking on me, no voices discussing me like a problem to be solved. Just morning light spilling across the floor like it had always wanted to. I made my own coffee. It tasted stronger than I remembered. The house felt unfamiliar in the days that followed, not because it had changed, but because I had. People called, apologized, explained. I didn't know. He seemed so devoted. You hid it well. I didn't correct them. Understanding comes late to those who benefit from not seeing. The legal process moved faster than I expected. Once control cracks, it shatters. The recording, the documents, the witnesses who suddenly remembered things they'd ignored. Truth has a way of rearranging memory. I was evaluated by doctors who spoke to me, not around me. They tested cognition, memory, reasoning. I passed every one. The word guardianship disappeared from my file like it had never belonged there. At night, I sometimes woke up expecting fear. It didn't come. Instead, there was something else. Grief. For the years, I thought love meant obedience. For the silence, I mistook for peace. Healing doesn't arrive gently. It arrives honestly. I donated the pills, not to charity, to evidence. The house became mine again slowly. I moved furniture, opened windows, threw away clothes chosen for someone who wasn't me. I found my ring in a drawer I'd never used. I put it on my right hand, not as a promise, as a reminder. One afternoon, I stood in front of the mirror and said my name out loud, just to hear it, just to claim it. And for the first time in a long while, it sounded like it belonged to me again. People expected anger. They expected courtrooms and speeches and a woman scorched by betrayal, sharpening herself into something sharp enough to wound back. I understood that expectation. I just didn't feel it. Not anymore. Revenge is loud. It demands attention. It keeps you tied to the thing that hurt you. I was done being tied. I visited him once, not out of obligation, not for closure, out of curiosity. He looked smaller than I remembered, not physically, though that too, but in presence. The confidence that once filled rooms had leaked out of him, leaving something thin and hollow behind. He tried to speak like nothing had changed. "You ruined everything," he said quietly. I studied his face. "No," I replied, "I stopped you. There's a difference." I didn't stay long. I didn't need to. The most powerful thing I could do was leave without taking anything from him. Not words, not apologies, not satisfaction, just absence. I went back to the house and began something new, not dramatic, not public, useful. I opened the doors once a week to people who felt that creeping doubt, the ones being spoken about instead of to, people whose memories were being questioned just enough to make them unsure. We talked, we compared notes, we believed each other. Sometimes that's all survival needs, witnesses. At night, I slept deeply, not because I forgot, but because I remembered everything and chose peace anyway. People think survival ends with exposure. It doesn't. It ends with choice. The house is quiet now, but not the frightened kind of quiet. It's the kind that breathes. Floorboards still creak. The clock still ticks too loudly at night. Life goes on in small, ordinary ways. I kept the curtains open. That mattered to me. Light should never feel forbidden again. Some mornings I sit at the kitchen table and do nothing at all. No pretending, no performing usefulness, just being present in my own body, my own mind. Presence is a privilege you don't notice until someone tries to take it. I never told my story to punish anyone. I told it so it wouldn't happen quietly again, so someone else might recognize the pause before a lie, the smile that comes too fast, the concern that sounds rehearsed. Gaslighting doesn't start with cruelty. It starts with kindness that asks you to doubt yourself. I don't hate him. That surprises people. Hate would keep him alive inside me. I chose something cleaner. I chose to live without him occupying any more space than he already stole. Sometimes, late at night, I catch my reflection in the window. An older woman, silver hair, steady eyes. Not broken, not erased, still here. If there's a lesson in this, and there always is, it's this. Your memory is not a flaw. Your hesitation is not weakness. Your silence does not mean consent. And love that requires your disappearance was never love to begin with. I turn off the lights now when I'm ready. I sleep when I want. I wake up knowing exactly who I am. That's what remains. Not revenge, not bitterness, truth, and the quiet, unshakable peace of being believed by yourself first. If this story stayed with you, if any part of it felt familiar, please know you're not alone. Take a second to like this video so more people who need stories like this can find them. Subscribe to the channel for weekly real-life inspired stories about truth, survival, and quiet strength. And if you feel safe, share your thoughts in the comments. Your voice matters more than you think. Stories like this don't end when the video stops. If you believe stories can protect, awaken, and heal, subscribe now and turn on notifications so you never miss the next chapter. Every subscribe helps this channel keep telling the stories others are afraid to tell. Have you ever been made to doubt your own memory or seen someone else go through it? Did you see the warning signs before the truth came out? I read every comment. Until next time, trust your memory, protect your voice, and never let anyone else write your ending. Subscribe. Stay aware. Stay strong.